to Be Honest podcast with Dr. Yana and Dr. Sherry, where we hold honest conversations about life, relationships, challenges, and everything in between, with unfiltered discussions with real people offering their authentic stories, experiences, and perspectives. No topic is off limits and no story is too small. Join us on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to United Public Radio 107.7 from New Orleans, Louisiana. If you're enjoying our content, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Be Honest Talks for more updates and exciting stories. Your support means the world to us. We love sharing our thoughts and ideas on this show, so keep in mind our content isn't personalized advice. We're a couple of enthusiastic voices with strong opinions. Take us with a grain of salt, a dash of humor, and always trust your gut. Now, let's talk about sex and laugh a little.
Oh, talk about sex and laugh. Yes, hello, ladies and gentlemen. We are here to talk about sex today, about human sexuality. So, what is human sexuality? Well, it refers to the ways in which we experience and express ourselves as sexual beings. It encompasses a wide range of aspects, including biological, psychological, and social factors. It includes sexual orientation, just like we're going to talk about, such as being heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual. And nowadays, everything changes so fast, I don't even know what kind of sexual there is, but we will talk.
There's a
Dr.
lot.
Sherry will enlighten us about it. Also, sexual behavior, sexual desires and fantasies, gender identity, and the ways in which we form and maintain intimate relationship. It is a complex and multifaceted aspect of human life that varies across cultures and people. So, has sexuality changed over the centuries? And if yes, how do we relate to it in the modern world? So, Dr. Sherry, shall we talk about the history of human sexuality?
Let's do it. Take us way
Hmm,
back
way back
from the beginning of time, because we
from the
all know without sex, right, we wouldn't be here without it. So take us back to the beginning of time.
That is so true. Things have changed so dramatically over the centuries, and they change just from the beginning to the century to the middle and the end. It's just everything changes so fast. So, the history of human sexuality is a complex tapestry woven through the fabric of civilizations, I would say, spanning millennia and encompassing a diverse array of cultural, social, and biological factors. While it is impossible to encapsulate the entirety of this vast history in a brief summary, we can, I guess, highlight the key milestones and themes that have shaped our human sexual attitudes, behaviors, and norms over time. We don't know much about the prehistoric and ancient times. Although with the ancient times would be much we could talk about ancient civilizations such as Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. They had such diverse attitude towards sexuality, ranging from acceptance and celebration to repression and regulation. Just like how about just like nowadays, right? In many ancient societies, sexuality was intertwined with religion, mythology, and social hierarchy. And if we think about that, that was a very intricate society or societies that I would say very interesting approach to human sexuality. For example, now we are pretty much open, or society makes us to be open, right, to other types of sexuality, not necessarily homosexual or heterosexual, right? There are different kinds. But at that time, Interestingly enough, in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, it was actually a norm for men to engage in homosexual relationships, and was absolutely normal. And they used women for procreation and for domestic affairs. So, if you could see, I was so, in fact, I can't say really mesmerized, but perplexed by all of those engravings and art on medieval vases, or the ancient Roman or Greek Hellenistic vases, where you would see depiction, graphic depiction of actual intercourses that people would have. The interesting thing about it, that the men would engage with men and young boys, and women would not be in the picture at all on those vases or bas-reliefs. It's a very interesting thing. And somehow I noticed that men would be depicted like really dark, and women would be depicted as white, I guess, to distinguish who is who. Not only that they were depicted having sex with each other, men, there were also a lot of depictions of animals. And if they were putting that on such domestic things as a vase, for example, right? Like, and evidently it was displayed at home. So we could think that it was a normal occurrence at the time. So if now it is a taboo, perhaps at that time it was normal. So if we're talking about homosexuality, it was a normal thing. In fact, it was not just a normal thing, it was an accepted thing in a society as the highest of all normalcies.
Yeah, I would say religion probably influenced a lot of the what we may consider taboo today. I'm not really strongly affluent with religious history, but I think it does create a lot. I would say like the Victorian times, when we move into that era of time, it was more taboo. I believe I'm a proponent of sexual fluidity, right? So I think sexuality is just fluid. However, when we start placing labels and designating things to sexuality, I think it becomes very complex and tabooish, as you're saying.
That's true. Tabooish is the thing. I wish you to explore that, because you are an expert in this topic.
Somewhat.
But
You know, they
if
say like,
uh-huh.
go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to move to medieval and Renaissance periods.
Yeah, will you take us through the history first? Because I was about to bring up the biological aspect of being inside the womb.
Ooh, all right. Well, let's go through the history before we go into the womb. All right. So, how did it? One thing that I wanted to mention also, a very interesting thing and curious thing on how do we as humans became at the time heterosexual, because that was homosexuality was a normal thing. So how did we get from homosexuality to heterosexuality? So the legend says that at the time when men would engage in intimate relationships with each other, and would spend so much time in symposiums. That's what it was. And now in symposium, we think that we can just go and practice our oratorial skills. At that time, symposium was actually men sitting together with men, a lot of the times around the pool
Like
and
a bathhouse
engaging,
today. Would you
like a
consider that a
bathhouse
bathhouse?
today, hammam.
Okay.
But there, they would engage in all sorts of different conversations, from politics to economy, literature at the time, and art. And there would be right there, that would be just in front of everybody. Um, hmm, let's say having sex or
We need to bring that back.
engaging in intimate intercourse. So what happened? Men were educated at the time, and interestingly enough, even if the first society was a female society, what happened to that? Oh my God, let's bring it back. The role of women was behind the closed doors, right? And men would come home to procreate. and raise their kids. No, that would be a female role to raise the kids. The interesting thing is that there was one woman, and I'll share that her name with you in just a few seconds. So that woman, she was actually the prostitute on the streets, and she decided, was thinking actually hard at the time. She shared that with me. That's how I know.
Oh
She was
goodness.
thinking hard, how can we bring men to socialize with us women more? And she realized that if men are so educated, then she needed to get educated in certain matters too, to be interesting to men, for them to engage in those conversations with her as well, to spend time with her as well. Such a smart prostitute, right? If you just look at it this way, such a smart woman.
Well, I
And
mean, a lot of them are. It was the first job, right? So I'm sure she held the throne of that. I'm looking
yeah,
forward to knowing who this is, actually.
yeah, well, she is not the woman in history that we don't particularly can read about her life. But the thing is, she did learn about the political aspects. She learned about economy, literature. She indeed became very educated, and men that probably would still engage in sexual relationship even with prostitutes, because what was the norm at the time, it was kind of a religious marriage at the time, and was really widely practiced at the temples. So that was a normal thing actually to happen. So probably men and those women also would be considered as like a sort of a holy prostitution. Interesting, right?
Right. Who
And
is this prostitute? My goodness.
so she decided that she is going to be this educated woman, and men started to spend more time with her. And then she brought it to other women, and the women decided also that they're going to follow this example and spend time learning and making men interested in having conversations with them as well, to spend more time in their company. Well, her name was Hetera, was Getera, Hetera, and this is how we have heterosexual relationships because of that fantastic woman. Interesting story, right?
Wow. Very
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, very interesting. So that's how we are today. Well, and then later we go to medieval and Renaissance period. Oh, my favorite one. The Middle Ages witnessed the dominance of Christianity in Europe, which of course heavily influenced the attitude toward sexuality. And we remember that more than we remember the Hellenistic and Roman times, of course. The church promoted celibacy, monogamy, and procreation within marriage while condemning premarital sex, homosexuality, and non procreative sexual acts. Can you imagine if we lived nowadays without non procreative sexual acts?
Well, we might
Time
not be having this show right now if we were
we
just
would not be we would be probably burned at the stake at the time. So Renaissance humanism brought about a rediscovery of classical texts that offered more liberal views on sexuality, leading to a gradual loosening of sexual taboos. And that took us then to enlightenment and industrial revolution. What happened there? The Enlightenment era saw the rise of secularism, individualism, and rationalism, which challenged traditional religious doctrines regarding sexuality. Thinkers like John Locke and Voltaire uh, advocated for personal liberty and sexual freedom. So, kind of going back to uh, Hellenistic times, right? The sexual revolution. Look at that. So, the Industrial Revolution brought about significant social and economic changes, altering family structures, gender roles, and sexual mores. And women were not kept behind the closed doors. However, you mentioned the Victorian era. And that was something very interesting. The Victorian period is often characterized by its paradoxical attitude towards sexuality. On one hand, there was a facade of prudery and strict moral codes, especially among the upper classes, while on the other hand, there was a fascination with sexuality in literature, art, and science. And I wouldn't be surprised because there was nowhere else to read it or engage in. This era also saw the emergence of the medicalization of sexuality and pathologization of non normative sexual behaviors. That was a very interesting time. So, do you particularly favor Victorian era, or
I,
was
I
it?
just I just know it appeared to be a little bit more repressed at that time sexually. I believe I would say people weren't as you didn't speak about it as much. Was it the Victorian area? They kind of or it was more. I don't have a go-to though. I believe I would come a little bit closer to industrial revolution. I'd come to the sexual revolution of birth control and those types of things and how that shaped history,
All
how that
right.
shaped procreation or lack thereof, and how it shaped the idea of having sex and so on and so
Yeah.
forth.
Well, Victorian society placed a strong emphasis on morality, modesty, and the
Repression.
preservation of the family unit. Yeah, sexual expression was tightly regulated,
Hmm.
and any deviation from societal norms was considered a taboo. So during this time, discussions about sex were considered improper, and open displays of affection were discouraged. Look at that, how much we have gone from there. But publicly discussing or portraying sexual topics was seen as scandalous and offensive. The Victorian era often associated with the idealized image of chastity, purity, and repression.
So would you say that's the birthplace of shame
Birthplace of shame,
with sex?
absolutely.
Kind
Very
of in history,
interesting.
right?
Yeah, they had a cult of domesticity. Again, if we're going back to the historical times, Hellenistic and Roman, the Victorian ideal womanhood was centered around domesticity and motherhood. Good thing there was not so much of homosexuality, and women actually saw men home procreating with them.
Well, that's why I say it's very important. Like men oftentimes aren't looked at as important as women because men can go to war and they can die, but as long as there's a woman around, she can procreate. But if all the women die, what are the men going to do? They can have heterosexual sex, but you're probably, chances are you're not going to procreate unless in
Oh,
today's times there's a lot of frozen sperm. So I guess if you can freeze all the that stuff, the science I think is going to be, it already is, the science is amazing of what we can create now. So it will be interesting to come back 100 years from now, even in a short period of time, and
I think
see.
we're going to be shocked with what actually is going to happen. You and I showing up there as we look right now with our ideas, and when we go there and everything is repressed, you're not supposed to have sex at all. There's no such word as sex. Remember, like in the movie, what was that movie? I forget that the futuristic movie where I think it was Sylvester Stallone was having. Was he or somebody else was having essentially the sex through the AI experience? That's what we call it now. That was a movie of the 80s. Imagine that. There was Sandra Bullock. I think that, yeah, that was Sandra Bullock. And she's like, oh, yikes. Exchanging fluids. Oh, no, we don't want that to happen. No,
Well,
no, no.
essentially that's what we're doing when we're having sex. We're exchanging fluids.
Exactly. That
Maybe
we're,
not
when
with
we're
AI, but I mean,
when we're kissing and stuff. Yeah, of course.
Even vaginally, taking it back to biology, in ultrasounds of the intrautero, when babies are inside the womb, they have sounds showing fondling of the genitals. They have ultrasounds showing erections and vaginal lubrication from birth on. So we're programmed essentially to procreate.
To
how
procreate.
else would this how else other than procreation would our species survive? Not to discount anyone's sexual orientation or identity, any of that. I understand we have science now, but there needs to be some sort of procreation in some shape, form, or matter for us to exist as a species. And it happens from the womb to the tomb.
And imagine if we had just the male society without women. And of course, it will just die out immediately, right? Unless we find some biological means how to make men pregnant. And imagine you and I went 100 years from now and we see men pregnant. Oh my God.
I don't know if they would survive
Feministic
the
revolution.
pain.
Dr. Sherry. Feministic revolution. And that's
Well,
it.
you are proposing something that, well, there is what's now like the trans movement where female to male are able to carry children, but they have transitioned um, with their identity. So essentially, a woman can identify as a man and carry a baby. Biologically, I don't believe so. However, many people out there may argue with that.
Well, they can argue as long as they want. What is this expression? Until the cows come home, until pigs fly, right? But nevertheless, biologically, it has not been yet possible. Maybe in 100 years it would be possible, which is not an exception at all. But at looking at the state of affairs as they are now, it is not possible yet for biological women, uh, no, for biological men who turned women to carry children. And in fact, I saw the interview of one woman of a man, uh, the head of the household with children who became a woman, and he had surgeries, and he was just actually crying in his interviews stating that he's having a lot of recurrent infections, and he's having children, that he had children, and at the same time he said that I have children, and was warning the medical facilities and the doctors, medical field, not to perform those surgeries because there's not enough of evidence, not enough, and we don't know how it affects human beings. And he said that if I had to do it again, I would not have done it. So evidently, our medical field has not progressed that to that area yet, and men are not able to become women, and vice versa, as much as they want.
Well, evolution again, I agree with you. Evolution is not man-made. Evolution
Exactly.
it's a part of organic nature, right? So I think when we start tampering with organic nature, things become complex and they can have adverse side effects. I mean, just look at climate change, right? We're tampering with
Mm-hmm,
organic
mm-hmm.
nature of a planet, which is having the repercussions of that. So I think anytime we tamper with something that's not natural, there's some oftentimes a, a consequence. And there are a lot of people who are have transitioned and they're regretting their transition and they can't go back. So, I mean, I support everyone to each their own in this world. Be yourself, be you, love yourself, love other people, kindness. I just on board with that.
Yeah,
With
medical,
you know?
it's just medical field has not reached that point yet when those surgeries would be successful and without complications. So like what I'm saying, in 100 years, we're going to be there and there will be men walking with the children, with
Yes,
babies in their
uterus
mouth.
implants.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right?
It
Because,
is very interesting to take. I look at it. I understand because I spent the majority of my life with women as a gay woman, so I understand. I identify as sexually fluid. I'm open to it. I don't know where I'm going with this topic. I guess, but I just believe that you can have a strong sense, but when it's so strong and you start to tamper with nature, it's just I don't really know how to put it into words. You know, it's just why take something that's so simple and that's given so freely and make it so complicated. But I guess that's just how we continue to evolve.
yes.
You know, if you've already created with a womb, why do we implant wombs? But what you're saying is in 100 years maybe women will be extinct and men will be carrying babies. Is that what you're
Not
proposing?
necessarily extinct, but perhaps there will be the revolution that the women would revolt against having, perhaps maybe not in 100 years, maybe in the 200 to 500 years, or maybe it would be imposed by the government. Who knows at the time?
So
And
either we're gonna this planet's gonna dissolve itself or we're gonna have a really interesting life
or we will
out
have the matriarchal society versus
there.
patriarchal society, and men would be staying home with children most of the time. Of course, they will be giving birth to them. Why not?
Well, if you watch that, have you watched the documentary The Zeitgeist?
Yes.
Okay, they go on to say we're leaving the age of Aquarius and we're entering the age of Pisces, and
Mm-hmm.
Pisces is a feminine. So you're kind of leading on the topic of femininity. So it's kind of like where femininity is rising, and patriarchy is kind of I guess it would define what people might call weak men out there today. A lot of people there's a lot more, it seems like people are becoming weaker, and it's just maybe that influx of evolution in that direction.
What an interesting statement and a great observation because I never gave it a thought. So perhaps that is the influence. And why? Because I've been pondering the fact of why men became so feminized nowadays and why there is this tendency for feminine type guys. And we have to have a balance, of course, feminine and masculine. We all have men and women, we all have masculine and feminine traits, of course, right? But at the same time, they have to be balanced. And when they get out of balance, then we deviate from normalcy, so to say, the normalcy in our society, right? And it becomes something else. So yeah, in 100 years or 200 years, that whenever you and I decided to jump to, that could be different. You know, and people would look at us like we fell from the moon because we would look different to
Well,
them.
I think if AI evolves in the next 100 years, AI will be carrying fetuses. We will no longer need the human anatomy to carry a fetus. You won't need to a surrogate human. You could surrogate out a machine.
I think that you're absolutely right, and I actually believe that it could be possible. It could be possible, perhaps that those stories from the futuristic novels, actually that were written in 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? And they projected such incredible information into the future, and now it is all a reality. Isn't that interesting? It is all a
Very.
reality now. Now, how in the world could they read that information? So that's interesting. Yeah. Just blows my mind. And wait, with AI, like you said, it could be human sexuality and sensuality. Everything will be different. Now, for example, I notice now that there is a trend of even if it's age of Aquarius, like you said, the feminine influences. However, that what is promoted now is the lack of touch and intimate
Connection.
contact,
Hmm.
lack of connection. So, how do we go from there? Would that also be a stepping stone toward the society when we would just completely augment our reality and change the way that we relate to each other sexually and sensually?
It already has. I think what we're viewing and what we're witnessing is the process of evolution. It's just a process. It's kind of like when our parents said, um, "You guys are learning so fast," and I think of my own children. Like, my goodness, look at them with these like electronics. But I think that's a process of evolution right in front of our eyes. All of these things we are witnessing, this lack of connection, lack of touch, is going to lead us into the next evolutionary era. It's a part of evolution.
That sounds scary, by the way, Dr. Sherry. That sounds scary. That the lack of touch would actually promote a totally different human beings.
Yes, because we already know that babies require touch. They'll die without it, right? That's a like a fact,
Absolutely.
not an opinion. Babies will die without human touch. So that's yet to be seen, but I think it is being seen in today's society, especially with like I guess we can input pornography here. A lot of people are turning to pornography and having connections with people online, not even having real human connections. They're having connections through a screen with a real person.
With a real person. Pretty soon it's going to be substituted with AI.
It takes the courage, right? Like I was listening to someone speak, and it says it takes if a man who's watching it was a man who spoke, and he said a man who's watching pornography minimizes his courage to go out there and meet someone because it's right so readily available.
Readily available. That is the thing. That is I believe one of the pathological things in our society, because we do not reach out to human beings next to us, and just because of our insecurities, just because of different kinds of problems, we reach out online because of the fear that we will not be judged.
Hmm.
So interesting, but there's no personal connection. That's very interesting.
It'll be interesting to see how sexual behaviors change over the course of evolution as well. Because without that human touch, you have to. How do you learn to connect with someone to have intimate relations? It becomes, I think, less and less people will be having those types of relations.
Yeah, do you think that it will lead to the diminishing of our demographics on Earth?
Perhaps. I think they will definitely be. I think it's creating a desensitization. It's desensitizing us to the natural aspects of sexuality. It's less,
Oh,
sexuality today is less about procreating than it is about desire.
mm-hmm.
It's about, I
That's,
want pleasure, desire. It doesn't matter.
yeah, something about instant gratification.
And a lot of people have this notion that the world is overpopulated. So they limit this themselves into believing that no one needs children. Not to fault anyone who doesn't want children. If you choose not to have children, that's definitely your prerogative, and no fault given there.
I know that Charlize Theron, she consciously decided not to have children just because of this.
But she's adopted children.
Charlize Theron, I don't know, but it's
Yeah.
interesting that it's like I adopt all of my pets, of course, because those pets that don't have any homes, I adopt them, and I consciously don't go to any of the breeders to get the high quality, so to say, right, expensive dog with fantastic pedigree. I don't do that. I take the dogs that don't have a home, right? And that's the best thing to say somebody. So perhaps that's what it is too for her, because the world is overpopulated with homeless children as well, who need a warm home, who need love and understanding.
Yes.
So perhaps that's what the rationale here is as well.
And I think some people have had really traumatic upbringings that they just don't want to pass on the trauma that they've experienced to children. That's just part of what they feel in their mind, and that's okay if you feel that way. We can't take somebody's subjective experience and trash it. It's like we can't take that away from anybody. That's their experience.
Absolutely. We will be absolutely surprised that even in a few years, how things will change, Dr. Sherry, because now I look at the AI technology and it blows my mind. You know, I was playing with it the other day and I asked for AI to create a certain image for me. I was speechless. I was absolutely speechless how it would produce something that doesn't exist and put it actually together. Uh, so we never know how the world is going to change.
No, we have to embrace it and try to make it a better place. Uh, you know, diminish the labels, diminish the taboo. I mean, let's think about sexual orientation, right? I mean, what is sexual orientation? It's basically someone's patterns of attachment. I mean, attractions, romantic, sexual, or emotional. It's what we're attracted to, how we are attracted to other people of particular genders. There's a list of them. I will go through them. There's
Let's do it, Dr. Sherry.
I think we're very familiar with the heterosexual, bisexual, homosexual. There's pansexual, that's attraction to someone regardless of their gender or identity. There's asexual, where that's a person who has a lack of sexual attraction to others. There's demisexual, that's a person who has a sexual attraction only after they have an emotional connection with someone. There's queer, which is used as an umbrella term to describe non heterosexual orientation and identities. There's people who are questioning; they're not sure about their sexuality. There's polysexual. These people who identify as polysexual have attraction to multiple genders, regardless if it's a man or a woman. There's androgenosexual. Those who identify as androgenosexual are attracted to androgynous people, regardless of their gender. There's
Hold on. What does that mean? Androgynous, regardless of their gender.
well, I got
Androgynous already implies that they're female and male in one, correct?
well, yeah, androgynous, but like a woman may wear a suit and have
Uh-huh.
really short hair. So someone maybe look like she kind of looks like a male, but someone that a woman who I that looks kind of like a male dressed in a suit who could be, honestly very sexy. They would be attracted to a woman who's more androgynous. Maybe a woman who is showing masculine tendencies,
Oh, so
or
who is not sexually, in fact, a man, that she is a female, but dresses as a man.
or vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
or a
So I could
male.
understand it. Yes.
Right. So, and that person who is androgynous sexual is attracted to someone who is androgynous. So they're attracted to someone regardless of the gender. So there's scoliosexual, which is an attraction to non-binary or queer gender. There's gray sexual, which is those who experience sexual attractions in only in specific circumstances. So I guess they're in a gray area.
Uh-huh, the gray area. Interesting, the grays. Okay.
There's autosexual, those who are only attracted primarily to themselves.
Ooh, this is interesting. This
There's
is interesting.
it's like primosexual, and they generally reject the traditional sexual orientations. And there's people who are fluid, and their sexuality tends to change over time. So there's a list of these labels and these orientations. There's a quote. It says, sexuality should not define you, and sexuality is something we create. Sex is what we are. It's what we do. Sexuality is something that we create. It's like our orientation is something we come up with to identify as
Uh-huh.
based on who we're attracted to. Not to be confused with gender identity. Gender identity is where individuals, it's what they feel they are on the inside. Even though I'm a female, at times I may have felt masculine. I may have identified as with masculine tendencies, and vice versa for other people. So your gender identity is something you deeply feel within yourself. It could be either or. Some days you could feel feminine, and you can, some people go, no matter what you're assigned at birth, is what I'm saying, you may identify as other than female. And that's gender identity.
Gender identity. This is very interesting. There is a lot of debate going on right now with whether the sex is assigned at the birth, right? Some proponents of this theory, right? They say that the gender is assigned at the birth, and biologically, realistically, it is not assigned at the birth. Perhaps on the paper it is reflected, but at the same time, the baby's gender was already decided and defined at the time of the conception almost. So if you look at it this way, it is you can do anything with that. So you can just deny completely the genders and pronounce yourself as whatever, right?
Well, yeah, gender identity, a lot of times you'll see people being expressed with clothing, appearance, pronoun usage, as you're saying, and how they express their sexuality. Like somebody who's transgender is not a sexual orientation. Transgender is a gender identity, right? So a lot of that can cause some confusion. Like
But that would also cause a different sexual orientation, correct?
it would likely be someone who is attracted to one, because there's men and women who identify as transgender, but they're not gay or lesbian. They still are attracted to, like, a man who has transitioned into a woman may still be attracted to women. So just because they have their gender, however, their sexual orientation hasn't changed.
This is so
But
interesting.
it would change, I guess, when they're trans, because if they're now a woman, they would become a lesbian.
So they will be attracting lesbian partners.
Right. But as a heterosexual male who was with a woman and heterosexual, once the heterosexual male transgenders and loves women, I guess he would then identify, or she would then identify as a lesbian or gay.
Okay, things get pretty confusing. I have to dive into it and to understand it all. And that requires probably a separate episode on just that for me to understand it completely. And probably by the time I understand it, there's going to be something new coming up, and I will completely be lost in everything.
Well, I think if we take away the labels and just if people could see that sexuality is fluid and we removed all these labels, and I know people will criticize me for saying this because a lot of people have worked so hard for the freedom to identify as someone other than
Right.
heterosexual, right?
Yeah.
But I think if we could just see sexuality as fluid and stop holding so much weight on this taboo of who's doing what with who, I think we could put some peace to that situation, that conversation.
I guess perhaps societally, maybe that would be a good idea. Nevertheless, the gender identity did not go anywhere, and we're still have our own genders like female and male, and now it's changing now, right?
It used to be female and male. Now if you align with the sex the birth the sex you were giving at birth, you're considered cisgender.
Elaborate on that, please, Dr. Sherry.
Like those who are if you align with the sex you were given at birth, you are now considered to be cisgender. If you transition, you're transgender. If you do not identify with a gender, you are non-binary. There's gender queer, and these people are often gender fluid. They're non-binary or beyond traditional. And
I'm
then
cisgender.
we would be considered cisgender under gender identity because we identify as what we were given at birth.
Oh, okay. Cisgender. Now I need to remember that next time I apply somewhere, they ask me about my gender. Because it's so interesting that I was filling out the questionnaire from the doctor's office for my dad, and my dad is 79 years old. And the new questionnaire that came in asked about his sexual orientation. And that was so interesting. It was funny at the time because he's 79 in all of those different orientations, right? And just to be funny, I put there all the sorts of different things for him when he is not actually that he's a heterosexual, and that what we know. My poor dad, if he's watching it right now. But it was so funny. Of course, the people choose not to respond, but at the same time, they would ask, "What do you identify as nowadays?" So I identified him something that he is actually, because the question will never come up, and no one will refer to him as such. But nowadays, there's a tendency to even ask on a consistent basis, what do you identify as?
Yeah, and you have just identified that that's how statistics can become skewed.
Statistics, exactly. We can just like throw it out of the roof. But what do you think? Like, consider with this kind of a tendency in 100 years, consider that you and I just jumped,
I
did a
think it
quantum jump in 100 years from now. What would humans be like?
I think it will be irrelevant. This will be irrelevant in 100 years. I think it's also I'll go far as out on a limb here to say religion as well will be somewhat
Hmm.
irrelevant to the species 100 years from now because I someone was I don't recall who, but I was listening again to another podcast, and they were saying how when gender becomes so um, complex, and so does sexuality, and becomes so complex, it often depicts an end of an era because it's there's such a smorgasbord of identification, orientation.
When was the last time it happened in the history?
Maybe the Roman times,
The Roman times, okay.
maybe before the fall of that, when heterosexuality was, I mean,
Hmm.
homosexuality was probably more prevalent, but people would men would be dressing as women, and I'm not sure if women were dressing as men. I don't know the history all that well, so I'm
They were
not
not. Hmm.
not quoting what was happening back then, but I think it's same thing. Rollo May, existentialist Rollo May, says in an interview that there becomes a time in history or in your present time when everybody there's a psychologist for almost every person, and that often also depicts the end of an era.
That is very interesting and actually pretty scary that it is going to be the end of an era. And if it is not going to be in yours and my time, it's going to be in the time of our children.
Hmm.
But for them, it is not going to be shocking, of course, because they grew up in this society. And for them, it will be a normalcy, an acceptable thing,
Hmm.
the end of an era. Well, you said we're gonna have a fun conversation. Let's have a fun conversation. Kind of sad to think that this is the end of the era, right? And things are
Well,
gonna change like
wherever
so
there's an end,
dramatically.
there's a beginning, right? I mean, I think it will become foggy for a long time and it'll clear again. It's like a storm, right? There's a storm, there's the clouds, there's the rain, the thunderstorm, and then there comes the sun and you have a rainbow. So I think just like all of history, people think we have it so bad now. Look back in history. I mean, imagine living in those times. I mean, I don't think we have it bad at all. I think we have it magical today compared to how they used to be. No antiseptic, no no anesthesia. I mean, torture chambers, the
Torture.
plague.
Yeah, there was genital mutilation, which is, I hope, is ending now, but it's a cultural phenomena. Of course, it's not in every culture, but in some tribal systems in Africa, correct?
Well, actually, circumcision is also considered genital mutilation.
Well, yeah, we have that in our society right in front of our noses, and we're looking to Africa. We already have genital mutilation here. In fact, every single time when a boy is born here in the United States, come on, it is the genital mutilation is performed every single time.
So
Oi,
it
that's exactly what it is.
as much as we try to have fun, we get deeper and deeper in the
We
rabbit
get
hole.
deeper and deeper. That's right. Because we're discovering that things have not changed that drastically from the ancient times. We still have a lot of, just like in Hellenistic times, a lot of homosexuality, right? It just was a taboo at some point in time in history. And then it became came back to normalcy.
Yeah, and it's a curiosity. It's like only human sexuality is also a curiosity. We're humans. We're curious, so we're curious to know if we change this, change that, if we manipulate, what will happen.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people they are really biased against, and I know that probably a long time ago I was too, because you grew up in this Christian environment and you think that, oh, this is really bad. And then with time, I changed my perspective, because I would see a lot of gay people, and they would be the sweetest people ever, and they would be raising children. The society, of course, it depends like where you live, but here in California it is not as dire. But there I lived in Midwest, and I had two guys who were married to each other and were raising two children. They were the sweetest ones. And of course, so we can look at the heterosexual relationships and even homosexual, and we can see that there is a pathology. But nevertheless, I would say live and let live.
Yeah.
However, what I would point out, that is one of my hot buttons, I would say, that I do not stand for children changing their sexual orientation. Not even they can change, they can believe whatever they are, but not changing biologically.
Yes. No
Here,
puberty blockers.
exactly.
That's a parental thing there.
Actually, my dear Dr. Sherry, it may not even be uh, parental thing nowadays, because in California, children are allowed to change their sex without the parental consent. Just think about it.
At what age?
I don't remember what age. I think at the age of 12. But who's going to pay for it, right? Nowadays, I speak to the school's counselors. I speak to the head of schools, uh, principals, assistant principals. And what happens is that I see this dire trend of not just a lack of freedom of speech, but complete disregard for even parental involvement in the decision making of their children. They can go to school and say, okay, like identify as a boy. And God forbid the parents come and say, no, we don't allow you to do that because you are still a youngster. Your sexuality is still changing. My God, your psychology is still changing. Your identity is changing all the time. It is not set in stone as of yet. How can we disregard human psychology? How can we disregard all of the research and actually be proponents of this kind of change, biological change in children, and give them hormones to change their sex?
Well, I think it's going to take enough cases of enough people coming forward who have had these surgeries and have had these changes, and they're having regrets. I mean, I've seen it. I'm seeing it more now that people are coming out and saying that they regret their decision. Please wait. So it's probably going to take people who have actually transitioned to influence others. But children, uh, again, it's I am sexually fluid. I believe that everything about orientation and how we look at people with orientation, every almost every part of each word that someone identifies as an orientation, the last part of that word is sexual, right? I'm sexual this, I'm sexual that, asexual, bisexual, demisexual, whatever sexual you are. We're so held up on the orientation of what someone does in what regard should be private. So I would hope that we could get to a place in our reality, hopefully in my lifetime, that we stop focusing on what people do in the bedroom or wherever they're doing these sexual acts with themselves or other people, and focus on the things that are important: loving one another, kindness, lifting each other up. I think we're far fetched and far away from that. I support your opinion on that. I do not. Um, I am not. I am completely opposed against children having those types of influences in their life, especially parents out there who are exploiting their children. And there's some kind of, I believe some of these parents are getting some kind of psychological validation for their own. I want to call it a sickness of their own, to be pushing your children into trying to change their actual anatomy. I think that's going a bit far. Again, let them identify with their sexual orientation. However, don't mutilate them. Don't allow them to mutilate their physical anatomy. I think that makes me a little heated, that topic.
Yeah, exactly. Like one of our hot topics, hot buttons, right? I have
It's
some
really
hot
sad.
buttons, and it is very sad. But if you look, like for example, Angelina Jolie and her daughter, correct? For a while, I thought it was a boy because I didn't see that she had a girl. It was a girl. I thought it was a boy, and just recently, because I don't follow social media, just like that, all celebrities, I have, I guess, some better things to do. I realized I actually saw that in the news. What was that? Like last year, that her son, that I thought it was a son, actually
I think
became
Shyla
back
was
a
her name.
girl. Yeah. So
Mhm.
she decided, and thank God, like she stopped her, I believe, medications to become a boy. So, and good thing that she did that right in time, because from the early childhood that she wanted to be a boy, and now she's such a gorgeous woman. You know,
Yes.
the funny thing, Dr. Sherry, I would share with you, I grew up with boys. I grew up with my brothers, my brother and my cousin. We were closely related in age. And I was growing up. I didn't have any cousin sisters, female cousins. I didn't have any sisters. So I wanted to be a boy. And I wore boys' clothes, shorts and pants. I wore short hair, and I wanted to be a boy. My
That's
parents
very
didn't.
normal. It's actually very
It
normal
is. It
for
is. Children
children.
go through that.
Well, children go through sexuality. Sexuality is on a continuum. It changes over time. Like yourself, I'm living proof as well. I've lived my life being attracted to men and women, having sex with men and women. So it changes over our lifetime. There's a lot of women who are heterosexual. For research goes to show that they're heterosexual most of their lives, and they are attracted to women later in life. It happens. It's fluid. I just proponent for sexual fluidity. Um,
But so interesting that you
Also,
mentioned
let's remind our listeners that you're coming live from United Public Radio 107.7 in New Orleans from Be Honest Talks.
Be Honest Talks. Exactly. Join us, ask us questions. In fact, I need to check if we have any questions. We do. So let's just see. Okay. Infection control in men. Diane Brighton is here. Okay. I don't actually understand. It's just a comment that Diane, if you could repeat it with a better spelling, maybe I would be able to answer that question. So, but yes, please ask us questions, send us questions so we could elaborate on different topics if you are interested.
Oh, and, in utero, let's when you're talking about like identifying, we feel more masculine. I grew up with a brother as well, and a lot of my cousins were male. A lot of times, the influences around us when we're kids, we tend to be drawn to that. In addition to, when I was doing some research in my graduate studies, I also learned that there's a level of testosterone that we're exposed to in utero, and if there's a higher level of testosterone, we tend to be like women who were exposed to higher levels of testosterone in utero from their mother's hormones, they have a tendency to be attracted to women. And men who had lower levels of testosterone were shown to be attracted to men later in
Interesting.
life. So it's a study. I don't recall her name, but I can look it up if anybody reaches out to us and wants to know that study. I'd be happy to share it with you.
That is so interesting. It looks like that when we look at the gender identity, like you said, that has nothing to do with sexuality, right? The gender identity at the very beginning, like when I wanted to
Well,
be
that's
a
how you
boy,
feel, right?
yeah,
So
well, I wanted to be a boy. I was a child. I knew nothing about sexuality. I wanted just to be a boy and engage in boy sports. And in fact, this is what I did. I climbed the trees. I jumped. I rode the. No, I did not ride a bike. I just actually just recently learned how to ride a bike. But I was just like running around like crazy, like a boy, and I did everything that boys did. But imagine my parents were listening to me at the time. Thank God it was a different time and would imagine that they would say, "Oh yeah, we're supporting you in that. You're 6 years old. You know, let's just do it. You, we would totally support you in that. Let's research some biological means medications how to make you a boy." Imagine the world would have lost such an incredible woman like me.
that's right. In addition to in addition to the mutilation that comes with it, think about putting your child. I don't even think a lot of people out there even think twice about putting their children on mental illness medicines either. And I'm not condoning or, I'm not supporting or I'm not opposing it either in certain circumstances. But I think a lot of people in this society want a quick fix. Or they there's
Absolutely.
no quick fix. There's no magic pill. I even like even the weight loss pills. I heard you have to take it for life. I mean, it's not a magic pill. Something that's magic is it should occur and remain, without maintenance. So you would be putting a puberty blocker in your child, which is essentially a hormone, correct?
It is.
So you're putting a foreign substance in your child's body. It's
Well,
definitely
and if
altering human sexuality.
exactly. And when the children that would grow up and actually set their identity, right, they would have enough of understanding of themselves, about their peers, they would stop being confused about themselves, of the peer pressure, for example, right? And they would say, okay, that I'm biological man, a boy, a young man, and I want to remain such. But imagine that, for example, even though a girl that wanted to be a boy, a teenager girl who wanted to be a boy would be given those hormones, and then she would not develop correctly. She would not be able to have children, and that she will be crippled for life when she would get back uh, to the understanding that being a girl is good. So that is, I don't even know what it is. In my understanding, it's just someone under the disguise of benevolence and listening to the needs of our children wants to destroy our society somehow. And if we look at it this way, like in a 10 years and 15 or 20, 50, let's say 50 years, a lot of the children would be crippled. And I don't believe that there's any benevolence behind it. Yeah, we
Pharmaceuticals,
the
money,
schools, oh yeah, it is
greed,
money. Exactly.
power.
Money and greed and power. That's what it is. Because if you go to schools, Where do they get these ideas? They get it from the media. They get it also through teachers. And I'm not the talking about the other, like, okay, that in the Midwest in the United States is totally different. In the South is different. But here in California is like a separate country, as if we are separated from United States,
We're trying to
right?
be so liberal and so accepting. I mean, look at the further up the East Coast. I believe it's Oregon that every drug is legal. But if you see some of the streets now, no, this is a completely different topic. It doesn't look like it's doing so well. We'll see what research has to say years from now. I still carry it back to all these identities and labels. As much if we continue to live under these identities and labels, people are going to want to change to conform to a certain label so people can identify them as such. I'm this, I'm that. If two people are standing together, why does it matter if they make out and play with each other's parts? It really doesn't. But we make such a big deal out of it because it's taboo.
And besides, we come from our own cultural backgrounds, whether it's acceptable or not. And it comes to the time, like as a psychologist, for example, with the understanding of biology and human, how human mind works, I would probably make my own observations. And if I looked at the teenagers in front of me with the complete change identities, right? And representing something out of themselves, that not something other, but something completely other. I'd call it it, because there's no identification like sometimes with anything else. It's like it. And in my understanding that a lot of people will be it in 100 years, because there is this tendency in the media. I have been observing that for the past 10 years, is complete merging of all of the sexual traits, of all the sexual identities, gender identities, becoming an it. It's non distinguishable from it's a completely new
Fluid.
species.
It would probably be fluid at that point, correct? You can't identify it. It just something that's fluid is just it's unidentifiable. The waves are fluid, right? So it's
Right,
never
unidentifiable, right. And now there's a tendency for unisex clothing for children, right? And for unisex bathrooms, okay, that's to tell you the truth, I don't want to go to the bathroom where the guys go to the bathroom, because it doesn't smell good to me. I don't want to see urinals. That's what they're called. I don't want to see them. I prefer to go to the bathroom that has that were designed for women without urinals. So to me, like sometimes, for example, like when the female bathrooms, they tend to be so congested, for Pete's sake, there are lines. And what do we do there in those bathrooms? And the guy bathrooms are just sometimes empty. Yeah, I would go to those bathrooms, like to use, but at the same time, I don't appreciate it. I don't want to see what I don't want to see. But here's a tendency that for unisex bathrooms, anyone can go. And maybe on one hand, it is okay. Maybe in the future, this is what it is going to be. We'll be using just the unisex bathrooms. There will be no separation between them. But it is in the future. It is definitely in the future, Dr. Sherry.
it'd have to be a lot more acceptance for, and safety. Rule out safety issues. Are people being assaulted in bathrooms? I mean, I'm sure it is a part of the future. As long as there's locks on the bathroom stalls, I think some people think that's a safety. Um, I'm open to the thing. I'm open to change. I'm just not. I just think that I'm just a proponent that if you're born biologically a male or a female, that's who you are. Even if you transition yourself, if you go into the military or into sports, such so on and so forth, I'm still on the side of if you were born biologically male, you should not be competing against a biological female.
I agree with you.
And whatever happens when we become an it, tag or it used to be a game, right? When you're tag, you're it, and to
Yeah.
evolve into a population of it, that's wow, what a profound statement. I
Yeah,
don't
there
even know
are
what that looks like. It kind of looks like what do you have? No parts? I mean, what is it? Can you
perhaps
go
that
a
we will
little further into that?
perhaps we will still have our parts, our biological parts, but mentally. we will be changed into something that is non-distinguishable. And how are we going to be attracted to each other? Because there has been a trend in movies, and it is such a subtle influence on human mind, on human psychology, especially on children, on teenagers that watching these popular movies. Even now with the COK, like John Wick, right? I was watching with Keanu Reeves, and there's this entity that is completely androgynous. It is an it. You cannot distinguish who that is. uh, and there is no tendency to even to distinguish. This is, I think, the media is really creating the it person.
So it's
If it
the it
is,
factor.
it's the, maybe perhaps we should call the it factor, and we are moving toward itness. So
So yeah,
it is,
it
it's
do
very
it.
interesting. You're an it, and we are not here to offend anyone. Of course, this is just a discussion of possibilities and observation of how the society is. And but the thing is, it affects the minds of our children, and for them, it becomes a normalcy. And children see that, and then when they see that in the society, of course, for them it is so normal, they don't even look at it, they don't even point a finger. And then not only that, that they accept that, and they may identify with it because it is so socially acceptable. Like you said, the society changes on its own accord, its own natural laws.
Yes, I don't think children should be identifying with any kind of sexuality. When that's why I keep saying like these sexual orientations, that sexual part of the word, that's generally a sexualness is considered an adult thing, right? We don't, maybe when you start puberty you get into the sexual realm of things, but children, teenagers are not children. They're children. I don't think in any way, shape, or form children should be identifying as sexualities. They're, again, like you said, their prefrontal cortex is not developed. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old. They don't even think about these things. If my 3-year-old came to me and said, I feel demisexual, I would probably fall on the floor. I mean, and again, like you saying, I respect everyone's opinion and their identification as who they are. I'm not trying to diminish anybody here. But I think sexuality and children don't mix. They're what's used to make them.
That's true. That's absolutely is the case. Well, Dr. Sherry, let's move to something more nice, uplifting,
I was going to go into sexual dysfunction, but that's not uplifting
happier.
at all.
Well, sexual,
How about the
sexual.
persistent genital arousal disorder?
Oh my God. For some people, it is not funny at all, my dear,
Right?
because
I
there's
think I'm
some
having an
people
orgasm right now. I'm
who
just kidding.
who are having an orgasm all the time, anywhere they go. They have a disability.
Mm-hmm.
That disability is, in fact, a real disability. And there is a woman, there are many cases, but one of the cases that the woman, she is just unable to sort of like be still. For her, it's a normalcy to orgasm, and orgasm all the time. She can't go to the store, she can't work, she can't do anything. She's
So it's
just having
embarrassing.
orgasm. Well, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for her as well because you,
Mm-hmm.
it's you. It orgasm cannot go unnoticed. That's the thing. I think it was biologically like designed that way, right? Like it can't go unnoticed that you are there. You're there, and there was interesting sexual psychological study was done on people who are in the moment of orgasm. And so interesting what they found. Can you imagine? Like people will come up with this kind of psychological studies. I want to
I
be a
think it's
part of it.
fantastic.
If I sit like behind the mirror, right, and someone is having the orgasm in front of me, why not, right? So that was kind of interesting. And what it was, the conclusions of the study is that people who orgasm have the same facial expressions as during the intense pain. That
So
is
it's
very
triggering similar neurons in the brain, but instead of pain, it's experience. Because I think pleasure and pain is a same signals in our brain, right? The brain doesn't distinguish between the two facial
Yeah,
wise.
but the facial wise, perhaps that is so interesting because it's the two poles of one emotion, right? So, how do we distinguish? Like, if you look at somebody who's having an orgasm without any audio, right? That you would think that the person is in intense pain. If you don't see, if you don't see anything else, that you like look at the face. Yeah, the person is in intense pain. Yeah,
That's it. I'm looking this one up.
yeah.
Can hardly wait.
That's a
Well,
legitimate
yeah, I mean,
study.
persistent orgasm, it's a curse, right? So
It's
for
a
some
curse.
people, maybe as a result of sexual trauma, you can't they have a hard time having an orgasm or psychological distress. And here you have people who can't stop having them, which is distressing.
It is
I
absolutely
wonder how
distressing.
common it is. I didn't look up to see
We
the
can.
how rare it is or
Look it up right now. Let's just see how it is because I'm so also interested too. I was, in fact, we had the goal of actually talking about sexual sensuality, but that is such a long topic and we just can't discuss it with the time frame. I think it should be the absolutely new topic of discussion because it has a lot of nuances, a lot of interesting things that need to be discussed. So in regard of the pathologies, sexual pathologies, yes, it's like also the addiction to pornography, while we uh, do not approve it and condone it a lot of the times for people who suffer from that, and it is an addiction. There is a lot of shame there. I remember also, well, in this case, there was no shame. And as a therapist, I remember one of my clients one time. Texted me something. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And I received that text and I had no idea how to respond to it because he was just asking me, "Oh, well, what do I do? I need to come and my wife does not want to have sex with me." And he did have a problem with uh,
erectile function.
not really erectile function. He had addiction to
Mm.
it. So compulsive erotic. What is the
Pornography
word?
consumption.
Not like pornography, but it was addiction to eroticism, I would say. And he needed to have a ejaculation and had an orgasm all the time. So what happened? I did not even know how to respond. She doesn't want to do it. What do I do? I can't do it all the time on my own. Well, I responded to him like, what could I do? And I'm not the sex therapist, right? And I had to come up with something. And I told him to do push-ups. Push-ups for me is like mental push-ups all the time. It's the physical push-ups. And there I suggested for him to do push-ups because sometimes we don't have an answer to things, right? Like in my mind, like do push-ups, some
Oh,
physical
physical
activity.
exertion.
Exactly, physical exertion is. And the question was how many, and I had to come up with how many. And then he thanked me and he said, "Really, thank you, Dr. Yana. It really helped me." So there are questions sometimes that arise that we don't even know the answers to. But for those people who have this kind of thing going on in their bodies, right, in their health conditions, we don't want to over pathologize and call it something else, like you said, taking labels off. But nevertheless, those conditions can be really debilitating and hard to deal with. And there is a lot of shame that happens and takes place that we don't know. We may condemn those people, and I am not justifying, of course, that behavior, the addiction to pornography, but at the same time, if we look at from the perspective of the people who are engaged in that, there is a lot of shame involved. They are not too happy about uh, their addictions.
Or it can be, in addition to the addiction, I think, first of all, do you know if he did it, the push ups with clothes or no clothes? I'm just
Oh,
kidding. They
with
know how to
clothes, with
answer. Okay,
clothes.
with
Why?
I'm just
Why?
asking. Well, he was so into eroticism, maybe he liked his penis to touch the floor as he did the push-up. I don't know. I'm sitting here wondering what this man was doing for the push-ups. Where the human mind goes, I tell
Yeah,
you.
the human mind goes exactly, and I guess the physical exertion really helped him.
Well,
So
yeah, I think pornography consumption is also a quick fix. It's also an easy thing for a lot of people. I recently had an individual come to me and they spoke about pornography and they were talking about how the genres have changed. And they said more and more today you'll see like the incestual uh, sexual novelty out there. So you'll have like step parent with a daughter or something like that, or wherever somewhere in the family. So this incestuous taboo is also become a part of pornography. So the amount of stuff out there is it's I don't want to call it crazy, but it's like wow.
yeah,
I think a lot of this
we don't
appeal.
want to call it crazy, of course, because that is one of the human conditions, and that would also be pathologizing. That is not
Mhm.
the medical terminology at all. But yeah, in
So would you
society, this is
say?
what we do. We
So
call
would
them
you say
crazy.
sensitization from pornography causes people to seek out more? I don't want to call it a sexual deviance per se, but to seek out things that are more fantasy or taboo because it's an appeal.
It could be it always anything that is prohibited is can be appealing, of
Hmm.
course, and that is also in human relationships. Just look at just a regular relationship. For example, a man pursuing a woman, and there's so many different women at the same time, and he's not, for example, emotionally attached to her yet, right? But nevertheless, her not being readily available or refusing his advances, she would immediately become appealing, even if she looks like a dragon, a bearded dragon, you know, that she would also be appealing to him. We have a saying, life is evil. You can even fall in love with a goat, you know, so you don't even have to be beautiful in the societal standards, right? What is beauty? But the thing is that you are particularly perfect and beautiful for one person, right? Or for several people, of course, who come in contact with you. But we don't have to have we don't have to be incredibly beautiful as in societal standards, because if you look now what beauty is, like we discussed, it's an it. You look at the models, there's no makeup on them, short hair, female models wearing baggy um, male suits. So it's not even a male suit, it is a baggy male suit. So we are turning to some itness here, not even any identification with anything at all.
We're blending.
We're blending, right? So, what was the question?
So
My
1.1%
mom,
of men,
my mind just
0.6%.
disappeared, went away
Well,
already.
1.1% of males and 0.6% of females will may suffer from persistent genital disorder.
Point 0.6, so it's not that much.
Persistent genital arousal disorder, excuse me.
While it can be so difficult for them, would it be fun to experience it sometime?
Yeah, but I guess anything else, you would just get so tired of it. Like, again, you're like, even though it feels so good, I wonder if it actually feels good. Because it did say here that it can be associated with chronic pelvic pain, which affects 15
Oh,
to 20% of the women with reproductive age worldwide. So, in addition to
of
that,
course,
it may cause
because the
pain.
muscles contract, and you're exercising not your biceps, you're exercising your muscles, vaginal muscles, right? So of course it's going to give you pelvic pain.
Do you think
So
hypnosis would have any bearing on assisting in some kind of change of
I
that,
think
or is that a
so. I
neurological
think
disorder?
so. I think so. You know, with any kind of a disorder, I think hypnosis is a wonderful tool. I know that with this kind of condition, medication actually does not help. What can it do? But hypnosis, with hypnosis, we can look at the core problem, with the problem that stands behind the issue. So instead of treating the symptoms, we can actually go to the origin of the problem and solve the problem there. So I believe it is quite possible. And thank you for bringing that up. It is
Hmm.
quite possible. And both you and I are hypnotherapists. And if people who are listening who have that problem or any kinds of problems, you can always reach out to us through our website, Be Honest. Podcast.com and through write to us the questions or your requests in the email address and just come ask us question. We never judge. We listen and try to understand the situation because as therapists we are designed this way to empathize and to solve the problems. But the thing is that there are conditions that are untreatable or treatable only the symptoms sometimes and not even effective. So look for the hypnotherapists with great experience and credentials in order to relay your problems to them and know that they will have enough education to resolve your problem if it is possible. So yes, that's a great topic, by the way, Dr. Sherry.
Hmm.
Yeah, to solve problems, yeah,
Yeah, if
through
you need some
through
sexual coaching,
hypnosis.
reach out.
And Dr. Sherry is the sexual coach, right?
Yes, I do specialize in that.
So not all of us, we all specialize in different things, and Dr. Sherry is a professional in that. So please reach out to her. She is fantastic. She's very empathetic. She is awesome. She's beautiful. And I was thinking, like you mentioned about the sexual fluidity. I was thinking, okay, that you look so beautiful, and being with other beautiful women is can be that even the work of art, so to say, right? And but it does. Um, it can create some problems for other people, right? If they look at uh, lesbians and they say that this is just unacceptable, right?
Yeah, you have to. People carry so much shame because of societal norms, right? Like there's a quote that says, if every time you have sex, you have to go into a confession box, you'll never accept your sexuality. If every time you do something, even outside of sex, you can't accept it, you'll never truly accept who you are.
To go to a confession box, what is a confession box?
Like in Catholicism per se, like
Oh,
you,
that, yeah, yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
every
yeah, yeah,
time
yeah.
you act on something, you feel shame about it. It's it's not good for you as a person. Just either don't engage in it anymore or just get to a point where you feel comfortable accepting what you're doing. It's a sexual act. It is a work of art. It's just a moment in time, right? But we place so many labels around it. I've even not encountered certain situations because of the labels. I chose, well, I'm not going to do it this time because I put a label on it. Well, and I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? I missed a complete opportunity to make art, sexual art. But I mean, I missed out on that opportunity because I chose to be hung up on a label.
Exactly,
But I learned my lesson.
exactly. But the thing is that we should also remember that there is this incredible shame component, and that could be a topic of a separate conversation. But what we should remember is that the shame concept in Catholicism and Christianity in general um, is man made.
Hmm.
Confessions are man made. And I encourage people who are struggling with this issue, with the shame, perhaps with religious shame, to look into the history of religion. And you will know that that concept is man made.
Yes.
So that shame that they speak to us and saying that we were born in what is it, in the sin,
In
or
the
that
eyes
concept.
of the
Oh,
Lord.
that concept of the sin and shame is just like brushes me against my beautiful fur right here, just against, not in the direction, but against. So what happens is that as a concept designed by humans, It was designed to oppress the masses. And who designed it? The governing bodies, the governments that designed it to oppress the masses. So if you still remain in shame and in sin all the time, you can always come back. You can always pay. You can always go to the box, confession box, like you said, right?
It's
And
really a useless emotion. It's a useless thing for your life to live in shame. It limits you to being something that you want to be. You want to experience something, but you're clouded with this cloud of shame. And it's unfortunate, but hopefully you
but
can grow out of it.
yeah, but also in the churches, it is taught that shame is kind of satanic, feeling that the enemy will come and this is how he deceives you. Nevertheless, like to feel shame about something. Nevertheless, it's like the double standard, right? Nevertheless, the church itself places such a huge amount of shame on you that from which there is no way out unless you go to confession, and even then you will be dirty because you were born in the sin. I was not born in a sin. I
Right.
confess to that. I don't have to go to the confession box. I was not born in a sin. I was born with my parents who loved each other, and I was a love child. So for us, for people who are actually born, that was we were designed this way, as we described today. We were designed this way to procreate. There's no sin about it, and actual the concept of premarital sex or sex in marital sex, post-marital sex, all of that also was designed by people because in ancient times there was no such a thing as official marriage, was no such thing as official marriage, and that was people would just like families would shake hands, and that was officially signed as a marriage between two people.
Yeah,
And
it used to take a village, and but people strayed from the
mm,
village and became owners, having ownership of property and people. And
mhm.
all the evolution of like you're mine, and all again that plays in genetic variation as well. It's like you're mine, and I want to know that the children you're having are mine. But of course people stray and all those things. But yeah, I agree with you. Anytime we carry, that's why I believe in sexual fluidity, because if we can believe that sexuality is fluid and we stop tying so many labels to it, we decrease the amount of shame attached to it. I'm sexually fluid. Who cares who I sleep with? Why does that matter on the conversation that I might be having with somebody about marketing? Why
the
does it
more
matter?
the most important thing, Dr. Sherry, is that you don't give, how am I going to say it? I'm not going to say that word. You don't give it. You couldn't care less about what people think about it. I just recently found a book, How Not to Give a Fuck About Anything. And that is such a fantastic book.
The
Oh,
subtle
this,
art of not giving a
it,
fuck.
not giving a fuck. This is so incredible. You know, sometimes yes, as a society and the members of the society, we do want to go along with everybody, right? And we can't just completely disregard the opinions of other people. But hello, if what I do behind the closed doors is my own personal business, nobody else's business, and if you want to discuss it, um, um, that is your own problem. That is absolutely
Yeah,
your. You
specifically
can go and
sexuality.
discuss it. You can go discuss it with yourself to death until pigs come home. No, until pigs fly, and what cows come home. There.
Yes, I mean, again, to clarify, yes, what happens behind closed doors, you're right, specifically to sexuality, because we do care about things that happen
Right.
to other things. But however, with sexuality, if it doesn't matter, if I'm trying to pitch the process of making donuts, I'm not talking about the hole in the donut has anything to do with the holes behind the doors, right? Even though they're both glazed and sweet and all those things anyway. Taking that very
Exactly.
far, I think we could probably we're about to come to a conclusion, I'm
We
assuming.
are. That's right. That's right. It was a marvelous conversation, Dr. Sherry. I
Yes.
learned a lot from you today. That is fantastic.
Thank you for talking about sex. It sells even though we're not selling anything today.
Yeah, we should talk about the sensuality some other time. Should make it a topic.
Yes.
So, as our program comes to an end, you were live with us on the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM. We have a fantastic episode for you next week. Please join us again. Next Friday, on February the 15th, we will be talking about the breakfast buffet, serving heartbreak, with a side of laughter. Let's see what we can do by the breakups, pre breakup, in breakup, and post breakup situations.
Right after
So,
Valentine's Day.
right after Valentine's Day, and oh my God, breakups do happen on Valentine's Day, and that's again like the concept that was imagined and created by people, the Valentine's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So don't take it so seriously. If you're alone on the Valentine's Day, it is absolutely fine. Be your own Valentine. Be
That's
in love
right.
with yourself. Do something good for yourself, and we're gonna celebrate the couples who are there, who will be celebrating that together. But those who are single, who don't have a Valentine, don't stress over that, because that is also human uh, concept created by humans, and
That's
also
right.
fueled by the media, of course. So
Eat
celebrate
your own heart
yourself.
out. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. Celebrate yourself as a queen, celebrate yourself as a king, and be happy with who you are, because you are your own first friend. Your first friend, best friend, your own best friend. So be your own best friend. All
That's
right,
right.
ladies and gentlemen.
And
We
be honest.
and be honest, always be honest. And we will see you next time.